welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today I'm talking with Jennifer Phang, who directed 2 episodes of the second season of The Flight Attendant. Jennifer and I had a great time. I kind of early on derailed the conversation to talk about the Bay Area because we both lived there, but I swear to God we get back on track, talk about her career directing some amazing television. We nerd out about sci-fi quite a bit, talk about her, starting off as a poet, love of poetry and all that, and storytelling, and just have a lot of fun, So, as always, keep the intro short. All you need to know is who it is and what they did real quick, and then you'll learn all about them in the actual conversation. So, without any ados to be furthered, here's my conversation with director Jennifer Phang. The way that we generally start off the podcast is simply by asking how you got involved in filmmaking. Not necessarily like how'd you suddenly become a director, but like, did you go to film school? Were you always a visual person, or did you come to it from a different angle later in life?
That's such a great question. I think for me, I remember in high school kind of falling in love with cameras when a friend of mine, kind of took me on these little night excursions with her little VHS camera. I'm totally dating myself, but
that was all of us. Don't worry.
And she and I would take turns, like being in front of the camera and being behind the camera. And there was, how some kids would spend their high school evenings, being naughty and by spray painting or, illegal drinking, or racing cars. I don't know. What we did was we took a video camera and just kind of made video poetry. Sure. And then I watched her cut it together, kind of VHS to VHS, kind of splicing things together. And that really inspired me. I just loved seeing the textures, these beautiful frames, these ideas coming together. I also had a lot of influences from this online writing this zine. I haven't said the word zine in forever, but there's a photocopied zine. A friend of mine invited me to submit poetry to the zine, and we became really close in terms of our artistic development. He introduced me to a lot of foreign cinema. That foreign cinema included the Kieslowski trilogy, Blue, Red, and White, included lots of other French films, and Genet and Caro, the movie Delicatessen. Do you remember? Did you ever watch Delicatessen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So how in Delicatessen, you're traveling from one floor at the top down through some pipes and come out into the sink of another tenant in this apartment building. And the whole thing is about this weird relationship that all these tenants of this apartment building have to the butcher. And the butcher is kind of dealing in, I guess, human meat. So all of that, it just was really intriguing for me. And I think it was a really great way to kind of find something to escape to, a world's film provided worlds to escape to for someone, an Asian American in Walnut Creek, California, in a suburb. Yeah. It was really cool as an opportunity. So I decided.
Well, I was just going to say I also grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm finding that more and more people that I identify with, whether they be musicians or filmmakers or artists, they all seem to come from the Bay. And I'm like, there's something magical going on in that zone where did you ever see the documentary Fog City Mavericks?
Oh, no, what is that?
It's a little older. I think it was on HBO or Showtime or something like that. It's kind of a hard DVD to find, but it's basically just about all the filmmakers that left LA. Your George Lucas and your Coppolas and all them, and moved to the Bay Area to make film. And something's going on up there. Something's in the water.
Something's in the water. They left LA. Okay. I kind of wasn't sure, but so George Lucas and Spielberg were from LA.
I think Spielberg. Let's see.
I don't remember.
Lucas. Yeah, Lucas was from Modesto.
Modesto. Okay, yeah, so that's like kind of
Yeah, yeah.
southeast.
But then he
Um,
went to USC and then back up. Didn't, because I guess the studio system at the time was not um, good for indie film, so they
yeah,
wanted to go up north and also the film as a medium was invented in motion picture film was invented in the Bay.
yeah. Um, Motion picture film was invented in the Bay. I'm sorry, did you
Yeah,
say like you mean
the act
the
of using film in a motion picture sense. The horse, the famous,
yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name, but that
I
horse
am
bet.
literally trying to come up with his name right now. Muybridge? Am
Yes,
I?
Edward Muybridge. Yeah,
It is Muybridge. Oh my
and that
gosh.
guy.
Video. Okay.
There was actually I looked it up because I was like making these connections to Bay Area filmmakers, and I was like, oh, Ed Muybridge, that's interesting. I look him up, and he apparently. So I grew up in San Jose and then moved to Napa Valley,
Yeah.
and so right next to where I grew up, this place called St. Helena, a place called Calistoga. So I was like, oh, whatever, backwards fact. So Ed Muybridge apparently like found out that his wife was cheating on him with someone in Calistoga, drives to Calistoga, shoots this guy. The court was like, yeah, we get it. And he got off. And I was just like, this is a fascinating zone of America.
Yeah. I I'm literally right now watching The Staircase, the series. Have you watched it yet?
No.
No, it's so cool. Antonio Campos was like the primary creator. Interesting filmmaker, really cool filmmaker. I think I met him a long time ago. Really does great things with camera. Check it out. But yeah, it's a lot. It's about an actual case of. I won't go into too many details. It's kind of dark. But yeah,
Oh, you know what? My girlfriend was watching that. The where the woman, it's called Staircase for a reason.
yeah, it's called The Staircase for a reason. I'm not
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
spoilers. I don't know what really happens because I didn't watch the doc. I didn't hear podcast or anything. So I
Right.
love that there's a little bit of a meta thing in there because they do actually portray documentary filmmakers inside the series. So that's fun. It's fun for filmmakers. Okay, so I'm back on topic. Back on topic. We're
Like I
talking
said,
about
this is a
Bear.
meandering podcast.
Oh yeah, no, I love that. Something in the water, the Bay Area. I think there's a certain sense of, there's more time to kind of ponder story and life. It's just people take a little more time, and that actually leads to better storytelling, in my view, because you're not trying to meet an artificial deadline. You're actually genuinely exploring a narrative and also a philosophy sometimes. Like people like want to have people in the Bay Area have something to say, or they're inspired by works that have something to say. And it's interesting because it's adjacent. It has like real life happening. The Bay Area has real life happening. LA has real life happening. It's just that maybe there's a little less, it's a little more overlap of like media and real life. Whereas I can see a world where like in LA, you've got Santa Monica, where everyone's in the entertainment industry. I shouldn't make too many generalizations, but it's just that you
Yeah,
just get a lot of people who are involved in the entertainment industry.
sure.
So maybe that's it. No idea. Yeah.
Well, it's also, I think, no matter where you live in the Bay, except for like the middle of San Francisco, I almost said the city, that would have confused people. In the middle of San Francisco, it is very kind of spread out. There's a lot of nature. It's quieter sometimes when I go back home, like even just leaving SFO, I'm like, it is way quieter here than in LA. You just have more room. There's more, especially in that main zone of, the San Francisco sort of area, San Jose a little bit. It just feels a little more inspiring. Because it's so small, I feel like the museums feel more accessible. I don't think I've been to a museum in LA, but in San Francisco, I've been, I think, all of them. In the zoo,
And this is, yeah, yeah. Even though I think right now LACMA is closed, I think it's I haven't checked it out in a while either. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, you're talking to, I don't know if you do sports too, but like, I don't want to like overly like speak to the kind of rivalry, but there is this kind of like, where's it better to be? And my understanding
The
that
Sharks
people,
Kings rivalry, is that where you're headed?
totally not, uh, much more Giants stuff. Uh,
Gotcha.
but yeah, we just like to laugh about it all the time, and all the Dodgers fans are like, "Isn't that we don't have an issue?" And all the
Yeah.
Giants are like, "Beat LA, beat LA." So I don't know. So
Yeah,
anyway,
Oakland's eating shit right now too.
what happened?
Oakland, the A's, apparently they're on track to be the worst team
No,
they've ever been.
no,
Yeah.
that's terrible. Oh no, I feel like what's going on because we're back at also is just we've there's not a strong. It's confusing right now because of the stadium issue. We don't know where our loyalties are. That's loyalty to anything. So maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's anyone interested in the Oakland A's, look up Brody Brazil and just follow all his coverage. Anyway, so you're coming more to filmmaking from the poetry side. So you were more in the like storyteller kind of lane then.
Yeah, textural and composition, storytelling through imagery. But then I was also super drawn to just amazing performances. I mean, Juliette Binoche, and just that the subtlety that one could bring to a performance. So something was a little more away from the. I guess what I really loved were textured performances that really I related to, that I could see truth in. Like I could see truth in Juliette Binoche, just as an example. Robert De Niro. You feel like these are people who are actually living their characters' lives. And so that makes it hard to actually remember that you're watching a movie when you're watching a movie. Instead, you're kind of super invested in the story and you're really concerned about the fate of this person or their daughter. So I think those were kind of the early influences. I mean, I've never said this before. I never said De Niro and Juliette Binoche, but I mean, just randomly kind of pulling things out of my memory, the two really strong actors. And then also Bruce Willis in Die Hard. I say that now too because it's true. I like watched Die Hard like 3 or 4 times, and in maybe 1 year, and I think on VHS. And I will say that what was wonderful about his performance at the time and moving forward was, you've got this really grounded hero who has flaws, is not perfect. You really feel his love driving his need to kind of rescue all these people and his wife. And so I guess it just started to open my eyes to the potential for cinema.
Yeah. Well, and with Die Hard too, you got a nice comedic sensibility. I remember there was, I don't remember, but I remember reading like everyone was going, "Oh, Bruce Willis, that dude from TV, the jokey guy. No, we're not putting him in the cool movie."
Yeah. And then he surprised us all. Alan Rickman was an amazing villain as well. Just kept giving more and more over his career.
So you'd actually be the perfect person to ask. So I came from it. I came to filmmaking from kind of maybe a more not traditional. What am I trying to say? Basic, where like, oh, movies are fun, and then I had to figure it out from there, And the storytelling aspect, the actual art of storytelling, didn't really come to me until much later, like halfway through college when it really started to. They're like, if you don't know how to do this part, you shouldn't be doing any of this. But I was wondering, for you, like, do you see, because we kind of talk about this off and on this podcast, but like there seems to be contention in modern, not filmmaking, but just films, that we feel like there's something that we're missing from the movies that you mentioned that maybe aren't being replicated today. The easy answer is, oh, blah, 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 Marvel, But of course, yeah, that's what's popular, but that's not taking over all of filmmaking. Do you see that happening at all? Are there any things you can point to that are more like those films we mentioned, or do you agree that that's kind of the case?
Good question. I made 2 features in the wake of my film school experience, the AFI, and both of those were influenced, strongly by, art house cinema. So I come from the world of like the Sundances and the Cannes and the, all those filmmakers being my peer, Ryan Coogler and I crossed paths a lot.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, obviously we left, not really left, it's not a very fair word, but like we also went on to kind of have commercial or, careers out of necessity, because there wasn't this kind of ability to be a self-sustaining, independent filmmaker. There are some pockets that still exist for that. I love that Chloe Zhao is making, both beautiful independent films and also like a Marvel movie.
Eternals,
like,
yeah.
Eternals, love that. Who doesn't want that? Me, I want that.
Yeah.
And I'm angling for some of those opportunities, but I think, I think you kind of have to, this is such a hard thing to kind of articulate, but you need a little bit of breathing room, like we were talking about with the Bay Area. You need a little bit of breathing room to kind of make those really powerful stories come to life on screen. You need development time. You need really supportive financiers and producers. And I've had those on my features, and bless them. They gave me Final Cut, right? So that's not something you hear about. Yeah, that only happens if you're kind of, making your own movie. I think, so it's a kind of, what I would say is it's a kind of a privilege to be able to kind of tell a story the way you want to tell the story, and with the depth that you want to tell the story, at the depth that you want to tell the story, because not as many people are weighing in on what the potential success of that story is going to be. So it's a huge risk. When I made Advantageous, which did great, it was acquired at Sundance, went onto Netflix, was seen by people all around the world at the beginning of Netflix expansion, into like kind of acquiring independent films. Like that was like a $500,000 sci-fi grounded movie, a sci-fi family drama. And we minimized our risks for the very reason that, people don't choose to make that many independent films. We were maybe a little bit too business savvy in the sense that we were going, okay, we don't want to take a massive loss on something so risky with non-white, mother and daughter, made by an independent filmmaker who hadn't been tested enough, and was a really dark story about just the future of women. And it has had a bit of a feminist slant too, as well. So we kind of managed our risk in that way. And a lot of people don't have that kind of privilege to be able to do that. And back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think more people found pockets where they felt protected, and more people were willing to kind of say, that's an amazing story. Let's bring that to screen. I care about that more than anything. There was more purity, maybe, to kind of the financing of stories. And yeah, so I guess that's my long answer. I really give a lot of credit to the Sundance Institute, Robert Redford, for championing that line of storytelling for as long as they did and still do. And I'm hoping that continues, not just with Sundance, but with other institutions, because that is like a really important part of our development for filmmakers and as a society. Yeah.
It does feel, I remember I took a producing class, and two things that stuck out to me were, one, he was like, so this was 2003, right? So not quite into today's era of filmmaking where there's a lot of outlets, but still not quite the 90s. But he was saying, all right, so if you want to get your film made, open up a Yellow Pages, go to Dentist, and just start calling all those guys, because they have a lot of money they don't know what to do with. And if you tell them, ooh, you can be a producer, they'll be like, oh, okay. And then the second one was, he was telling me about all these like film buying conventions where they would go to hotels, they'd like clear out the bedrooms and you'd go in and like show these people your movie. Those don't exist anymore, right?
I've never been to one. Oh, let me. Back in the day, I may have been once to AFM, if that's what we're talking. That kind of thing.
Yes, I believe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they do or don't exist because they're not really where I raise my money. Because the stereotype was something like that's where you get maybe your horror film financed or your attached, like kind of packaged movie financed.
Gotcha.
But I'm definitely no expert on those markets.
Sure.
And I don't know if they do or don't exist. I've been to, like adjacent ones, like I've been to, kind of indie minded ones or art house minded ones. I was in Germany at Mannheim, Heidelberg, and there was a European version of what we're talking about, where there was a lot of speed dating, people pitching their movies from table to table. And I did that at Tribeca in a way, and I did that at in IFP. And I can't remember, it was called IFP Market back in my day. And that often led to filmmaking. Sundance also has something called Catalyst, which is a version of that, but again, very like selective and thoughtful in terms of their curation. So I think versions of what we're talking about do exist, but not quite. But I do not know if the kind of AFM version of things is proliferated still throughout the world. No idea.
Because it does feel like those smaller projects that we're talking about. Well, you could tell me. I don't know why I'm pontificating. I don't know. But is it harder now to get those projects funded because those avenues are less available, or is it just different now?
I don't know if it's
because you could just put it on YouTube if you wanted,
Right. I think a lot of people could do a lot of things. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of people are spending their time figuring out how to hack into going, how to break that, how to leverage off of instant internet fame. So that's maybe where a lot of the energy we're talking about is going, because it's available, it's instant, and you feel like there might be kind of ways you could there are analytics that are kind of there for you instantly as well. So maybe that's why people are not playing the long game of making an independent film. I think, though, that just to kind of flip this whole thing on its head a bit, I would say that when we talk about like the storytelling that we missed from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 90s, I do feel like episodic, whether it's premium episodic or elevated episodic, which might be just anywhere, on any streamer, there are a lot of visionary filmmakers in that space now, and we know that they're telling powerful stories that we can't not talk about, right? I mean, The Staircase is kind of probably one of them. I'm not done watching it, but I mean, I feel completely addicted to watching it. I'm literally like falling asleep in my phone because I can't stop watching it. So
right.
There are just so many of those examples. So it does. And then what I'll say about that too is that, filmmakers like Antonio Campos are, people who like storytelling that's thorough and like really well developed, love the idea of, like, for me especially, I love this idea of like a limited series, because that's basically 2 featured films or 1 super long featured film where I'm allowed to kind of go deeper into every character that I care about, get multiple perspectives, try from episode to episode different stylistic choices, maybe motivated by the perspective, by the psychological state of our main character, or a peripheral character, or that peripheral character's dad. I mean, it's lovely because, I mean, I'm just thinking of a ton of different series where you suddenly get to know the biography of the parents, and that somehow matters. It's a really wonderful canvas for a filmmaker if you are so lucky to kind of get into that limited episodic, limited series space.
Yeah. We've mentioned that a bunch on this podcast, like those, whether they be, limited series or television, it's, even though it's not television anymore, streaming, that does seem to be kind of the vanguard. That's the future of storytelling for the moment. But you're right. Like as for a blockbuster example, I saw Jurassic World, and then I marathoned Stranger Things, the first half of Stranger. It's 7 episodes. It's the first half. They're all like an hour and a half long episodes, and both of those projects. Yeah, four part 1.
Okay.
And both of those, the film and the series, felt like they both tried to handle the same amount of characters. But with Stranger Things, you had about 8 hours to deal with it, and with Jurassic World, you had 2. And one was less successful with that.
Okay, understood. Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, it is a great space for people who have, who really love storytelling, who love character building, who love cinema. It is. So in a way, my answer is like cinema's not dead. It's just it's just thriving, in limited series. So it just becomes a question of like how many people get to do that. Let me just take this conversation one step further and say there's also this like kind of hunger that I sense out there for returning to movies. And it's not just, oh, I need to go to a theater to experience a movie. It's like, I just want a really good story, and I just want to be able to like go spend like 1.5 hours to 2 hours, 2.5 hours if I'm really excited, and be done with it. I don't want this obligation of just feeling exhausted going from, this to that, to the other thing, and just waiting another, month to get the rest of my story. So I think in a good way, the tide might be changing again, back towards like finding these really good stories to tell that are kind of a package unto itself.
Yeah. I've noticed that you, in the shows that you've done, there's a lot of sci-fi in there, and you were saying your film out of college was sci-fi. Are you drawn to sci-fi and kind of genre intrinsically? Because I certainly am.
Yeah, one of my early influences, including all the ones I mentioned, including like, the Kieslowskis and the Diehards and the Delicatessens, was actually Blade Runner. And I actually am literally in a documentary talking about that, weirdly. And it was so cool because it was a documentary that was called, I can't remember what it was called.
These Amazing Shadows?
These Amazing Shadows. And
I got it on Blu-ray.
Word.
I seen it.
You did. Yeah. And it was dreamy because, like, guess who else was talking about Blade Runner besides me? Was Christopher Nolan. So it was me and Christopher Nolan loving Blade Runner and just kind of speaking about how, transportive it was. How, the building of the environment was just so important, and just kind of allowing or inviting an audience to just lose themselves in a completely different world. And that was yet another inspiration for me, at first I was like, the reason I got into independent film was it was accessible. I didn't have, millions of dollars at my fingertips, but I really was really kind of, my imagination was really sparked by the world of Blade Runner and the soundtrack of Blade Runner. So yeah, that made me really excited about, everything sci-fi. Obviously, the low hanging fruit, of course, is Star Wars and E.T., Back to the Future, but also, reading Arthur Clarke's short stories. And then now, more recently, I kind of binging all the Black Mirrors and going to this dark hole of like bleakness, where we just kind of imagine the worst version of our futures. It's all fascinating to me. And
it's like sweating it out,
Yeah. Let's come to terms with where we could go so we don't go there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Advantageous, my feature, was about. It's kind of like, okay, what's a worst case scenario? How do we not do this? And so yeah, I definitely look for, and I'm often seeing on my desk a lot of science fiction projects. Yeah, and I really enjoy the world building. I love playing with rules, like there's a more grounded and more like hard sci-fi, like The Expanse, where you're just kind of thinking about all the laws of physics and how it all can play into a character's journey and what they're physically up against, even while they're trying to save the love of their life. And then there's kind of the foundation version of it, where it's more about the politics of intergalactic diplomacy, and that has a little bit of a Star Trek overlap. So I don't know. I just find it all wonderful and exciting, and it's also a really great place, a great genre to test ideas out. Like really kind of radical ideas can be tested out in the sci-fi world, just because it has fewer rules that we all need to abide by. And in fact, our audiences who are like kind of sci-fi geeks like us are excited by new ideas and are excited by like breaking rules sometimes. At least a lot of them are. Some people are just like, no. My brother, who's like really into The Expanse, he likes all his sci-fi, hard sci-fi, hard sci-fi all the way. Everything has to test out, everything has to make sense. But it's really great. It's a beautiful genre, and as is fantasy.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought up The Expanse, because that, if anyone hasn't seen that show, excellent show. I was wondering what your experience was on it, because you did one episode?
Yeah, I did 2 episodes.
2 episodes.
We were in season 3, and The Expanse is so wonderful. It was actually literally about to, it was finding the end of the line on Sci-Fi Channel and hoping to maybe land on Amazon. And I was kind of at the end of the Sci-Fi Channel. And we were I kind of had the exciting privilege of being able to introduce or work with like Clarissa Mao's character. And that was a really cool opportunity, because she was just, if you read the book, she's just so troubled as a woman, so determined and fierce, and it drives her to do really dark things, and play a really big role in like kind of shaking up the universe. So what was it like? I mean, the cast, and the crew are super bonded. That
was kind of where I was going to ask, because it feels like you're getting into a very tight knit group.
Oh yeah, so tight knit, and it's a beautiful thing. They for 2 seasons and then 3 seasons, they had to kind of what I think the producers talked about was they're trying to attain the production value of Gravity, but on an episodic basic cable budget, right? And so how do you do that? And what that takes is grit and love and kindness and really smart producing and smart writing and storytelling. And so that was just kind of a privilege to kind of insinuate myself into that space. I'd come from making world building myself with Advantageous. We made a $500,000 sci-fi film with 200 visual effects shots, building a world out of New York City, combining that with San Francisco and LA to kind of make a city of its own, and doing it on a shoestring budget. So it wasn't like a surprise to me when we were physically making mech suits, and it wasn't like a perfect situation, because sometimes something would break for a reason, because it's literally there. They're literally strapping pieces of metal to a woman who was very strong, but not strong enough to kind of, deal with 100 pounds of metal on your body, metal on your body. So for sure there were like challenges, but it wasn't in any way something I did not anticipate. The takeaway was just like, it was really just, I asked to be on that show from the very beginning, because I felt like I believed so much in the storytelling, and I believed in the performances, and I love the nuance in the relationships. You have these friends much like the Expanse cast and crew is bonded, the crew of the Rocinante, Rocinante, has a bond, and it's tested a lot, but ultimately, they stick together and they make it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm trying to remember other little details. If you have any specific questions, maybe I could answer them.
Oh no, that was a very open-ended question. I will say that you kind of brought it up, and this is something that I'm particularly drawn to in sci-fi, and I'm wondering if maybe you're kind of a nerd like this too. Is the great thing about sci-fi usually is great costumes and great props. Like 9 times out of 10, I'm watching that and going, man, that's a really cool suit. Like,
yeah. Yeah, that is key. I mean, I remember just being continuously blown away on Foundation by our costumes. Emer was our, I can't pronounce her Irish last name. I super apologize, Emer. But she really brought it, Every time I walk onto set, there was one scene where one of the clones, emperors, the young version, played by Cassian Belton, he walks onto set. I'm like, what are you wearing? This is amazing. It just looks so beautiful. The colors that she brought forward blended so beautifully with the greenery. Anyway, sorry, nerding out about colors now, but
colors, it's hugely important for DPs. Feel free to nerd out about that.
And speaking of DPs, for that sequence, I remember our DP saying, wouldn't it be nice if we brought in these like blue flowers to kind of break up the landscape? And like, I saw them and I'm like, oh my God, thank you for thinking this way, because we're making a frame, and thank you for bringing in flowers, man. Like that's like always gonna, in a very simple and easy way, like just make something more magical, more otherworldly. If you kind of are really choosy about these little bits, these little areas that putting flowers in places you don't think they belong, even especially when you're creating sci-fi worlds where that planet is not your own planet.
Yeah. What do you value in a DP, and what are some things maybe DPs should avoid?
That's a great question too. I value in a DP just a strong sense of composition. I love, obviously I care about composition. I'm always looking for interesting frames. Having an open mind to other kinds of angles would be great. It's always a challenge, especially in episodic, where you're kind of afraid of like rocking the boat, most especially if there's a look. And at the same time, if you don't, push the envelope a little, you kind of are redelivering the same old look, and you risk losing the audience in a way. I mean, as long as the storytelling and acting is kind of making progress, fantastic. If the look is kind of giving you the same old, maybe that works for procedurals and some dramas, but having seen the other side, having seen, I'll just keep coming back to the staircase because it's fresh in my head. Sure. Having seen, on the staircase, this is what they do. You've got this car chasing this other car. They're just driving along. It's a family in 2 cars. You've got this shot that either is on a Russian arm or maybe on a drone that just kind of checks in with one car, dives over, turns upside down, and then just drags along the street, possibly like a invisible cut where they dissolve to the street again. Comes in, comes up over the other car, right side up, comes back in, turns upside down again. And, you think that's kind of, when I say that to you, depending on the show, they might say something like, that doesn't feel motivated, which oftentimes it won't be. But when you have characters that are going on a journey that is all about their state of mind, the subjectivity of their experience, if you're able to kind of go, that actually does speak to maybe this one character's state of mind, this whole family's state of mind, there's something there that will make our audience excited, because it will just make you ask these questions. What's going on with the characters? Whether or not they know it's the camera doing that. So I'm always excited to work with DPs who are willing to try things, or able to try things. Um, in in features, I'm going to ask them to try things
Right.
more strongly, and I'll direct them to try things. It's a little bit more negotiation in episodic just because of time, budget, and also the look of the show. Um, but I also say, watching out for, like, I think in the same way that I would say to myself and to other directors, stay engaged, keep trying to be interested in your shots. Be interested in your shots. If you're not interested in your shots, if you're bored, maybe the audience also will be bored.
Yeah.
There's a chance. There's a chance. So yeah, I guess that's what I think about a lot. I just want
Yeah.
to stay excited. Yeah, there's also the other danger of just being too bored, like too bored too soon because you've done. I like to joke about some. It's not actually me who likes to joke about it. I just remember a friend of mine joking to me about how you could see that this director was bored, and so they were trying really hard to kind of mix it
Oh,
up.
sure.
And it actually was completely unmotivated and actually quite distracting. So it's a fine line, and you kind of have to also be an adult about it. So, so yeah, that's the balance I think of being a DP or director, is to kind of figure out, what's where restraint is useful and where pushing the envelope is useful.
Yeah. Well, and it makes total sense because if you're the person taking the audience on the ride and you're bored with the ride, why would they engage? That brings up an excellent point that I think you can extrapolate, which is like, I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it or heard these kind of things where someone will be like, they're making something for the audience, quote unquote. Like they themselves don't get it, but they're like, oh, this will track, like the audience will like this. I personally don't get it, but we know this tests well or something like that. And that often doesn't, like the audience can smell that you weren't the audience wasn't someone who should be in the audience wasn't making it.
I don't know. Like, do you have a specific example? Or maybe that's not fair.
Yeah, I don't want to start calling people out, but no, I don't have a specific example, but it's more in my sort of much smaller realm where I couldn't point to any major motion picture or television show, but I'll see on sets that I'm on where a person will basically say that, like, I don't know, I just know the audience likes this or whatever, and it's like, oh,
gotcha.
Well, maybe we should get one of them to shoot it. Like, why are you?
True, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
I guess the bigger thought there is just like you were saying, staying engaged. I guess that's the question then, is like, how important is it? Is it possible to be engaged 100% of the time? And what do you do if you're burnt out but still need to get through this shooting day or whatever? Like, how do you kind of save yourself in that regard?
Well, Anna, sorry, 1 second. Let me check my hours. Okay, cool. Anna, there's actually not a lot of room for being burnt out, even though
Fair enough.
Your mental health does want to allow you to have those moments of pause where you reflect. And yes, you try to build those days and times and zones in. It's why, DPs and directors might disappear at the end of a shoot day. A shoot day is, or disappear into their trailer even. A director might disappear in a trailer. Because yes, it's we're usually dealing with a great deal of things, a lot of moving parts. And so, but the funny thing about it is there's just no time to be burnt out.
Well, it is like sports, kind of like you were saying earlier. I don't think any hockey player is ever like, hey, just skip me on like the next 4 shifts. I'm good. I gotta
absolutely right.
Texting on the bench.
Terrific analogy. Like, I was yay, I'm a Warriors fan. Yay, we won. Um, and, yay, Stephen Curry and Draymond Green are some of my, role models in one way or in the other. And one of them, Draymond's toughness and his kind of focus on the game and winning. As much as winning doesn't have to be like you winning can be the game winning, the team winning, right? So,
Yeah.
so I like that he has a little bit of grit in him. Stephen Curry, just his kind of ability to kind of flow, accept any flaws he has in any given moment, but trust in the overall picture that, I believe in myself, I believe in my team. I'm going to lead with love for the game and love for my teammates. And that, then also never take your eye off the ball. These are all things that most directors need to inhabit. Like these are qualities we need to inhabit. That was very relevant for me when I, worked on the flight attendant recently, and we had 2 units, one in Los Angeles and one in Iceland, and we were prepping Iceland while shooting, in LA. And so that meant I had to be thinking about 2 different countries and 2 different time zones and how we would tackle things across those time zones, how we could, how visual effects would or wouldn't play into one country and yes into another, and how to kind of work with any schedule challenges we were getting because Kaylee Cuoco needed to be a lot of different places on a lot of different units at once. So all that jibber jabber is to say that there's no time to be burnt out because everyone and the budget kind of depends on you making these decisions in concert with everyone else's information.
Yeah. Now, you brought up the flight attendant. I saw the first season, the first couple episodes of the second season. My girlfriend's a big fan of it. I like it a lot too, but she's watched it all without me. So, but were you able to bring any of those sort of sci-fi sensibilities to that show? That is fantasy-ish. There's some elements of fantasticalness in her mind palace and whatnot.
What preceded my sci-fi infatuation was, artistic, interest in surrealism, interest in kind of dreamscapes. And my experience in science fiction from a technical perspective also lent itself really well to the flight attendant. So as a funny example, I also worked on Resident Alien and that Alan Tudyk. And there were 2 Alan Tudyks in one scene, or two fantasy scenes, I believe. And so, knowing how to operate with some version of a motion control rig or a faux MoCo rig, and also my work on Stargirl, which was that DC show, like we actually also did a fake motion control kind of scene. All those experiences really lent themselves well to kind of being ready to figure out how to logistically make it possible for Kaylee Cuoco to act against herself in a single moving shot, or how we would schedule our coverage to make sure that we were also being efficient about her costume changes, her hair changes between these multiple versions of herself. Back to the surrealism part of it, we threw a bunch of roses into the room, into one of the Mind Palace scenes because her mind was being overwhelmed by the pressure that her boyfriend was putting on her by bringing her roses. And another part of that Mind Palace was another Kaylee Cuoco who wore a black sweater and was super fatalistic about her relationship with everyone and her relationship with like life and death. So, we dropped a bunch of chains that we kind of boomed down through these chains in a crane shot and kind of played with the perspective in that way. So yeah, there was a little bit of painterliness that was coming out of me in the Mind Palace. And then there was that technical side as well. And then also being really supportive to Kaylee because she was pulling off an actor's feat. The idea of playing 4 different versions, four different very distinct versions of yourself or your characters' state of mind, and also being able to technically pull that off by repeating your own blocking and timing, listening to recordings of yourself and playing against that, making sure you're at the right place at the right time. It was such a collaborative effort, and I really need to applaud Kaylee and everybody on the technical side for making sure we didn't mess that one up.
Yeah. Now, when you say fake MoCo, what do you mean by that?
So faux MoCo, so motion control rigs that are kind of more official involve, generally this big old machine, that has a programmable crane or arm, maybe on a dolly, and it's on a track. And as when you kind of play your master shot, your first shot, your beauty shot again and again until you get the staging right. You get the staging and the camera move right. And once you've locked in on that version of that shot, I'm like not saying it very well right now, but once you basically found your best master, you decide that every other take has to match that master. So the camera will repeat that move, and everyone has to kind of match. Everyone has to be in the right place in the right time for that camera move. When we do a faux MoCo version of that, one version of it, just as a very basic example, you dolly into position, then you lock it off. Then you do nodal work, you do pans, and then from there you're able to kind of play within that space as long as you're just doing nodal movements, and then you can kind of like blend multiple takes together. But you have to kind of get to that locked off 3D move. You have to kind of find your master 3D move and then lock that off. Camera doesn't move. Then you can like bring in the second version of Alan or the second version of Kaylee, and that person exists within that space, and the camera's just kind of panning and tilting. Or you're maybe doing digital push-ins in post. So you're keeping movement going, but you've done a really much cheaper version of MoCo.
Yeah, I don't know why I never thought about that, but yeah, as long as everything stays nodal, you can track in any clip from anywhere. You know, because I use split comps a lot when I'm doing honestly anything. Hide boom poles or lights or whatever. But I didn't think about that. You can totally do that with other people.
Yeah, you can, and there's like some minutia in there. Like I worked closely with a VFX supervisor from COSA on Resident Alien, and he offered up some even more liberties than I expected. But I think it might involve a little bit of roto in that respect.
Sure.
So it's just kind of it's really about what your VFX supervisor believes that you can pull off within your budget. So yeah.
That really does like you do have the full package there then, knowing, because I know for a fact that a lot of stuff will get into post. I do plenty of editing myself, and clearly no VFX supervisor was asked any questions or anything. You get a phone that's got green gaff tape on it and they're like, replace that, and you're like, oh, I hate you. But coming from, again, that sci-fi background, you already know a lot of those tricks and like kind of what the boundaries might be.
Yeah, I do have a kind of nice basic understanding for a lot of reasons. My very first feature film was called Half-Life.
Not the game.
Not the game, yeah. I was an art house girl, not a gamer at the time. And so, yeah.
Have you played it since? Have you played the game since then?
I think I did play the game in and around post of Half-Life. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I'm like tons of memories about that.
I know it's groundbreaking game.
Very cool game. But I'll say, a shout out to my dearest friend, Catherine Tate. She's one of my dearest friends. She and I met on Half-Life, and she had just left ILM and was excited about kind of starting a kind of production program in a school in San Francisco. And, I became kind of a partner to her program in terms of like as an independent filmmaker, providing her footage that needed, help, for better or worse, like going through students' hands, and then kind of like coming out the other side and being an independent, short film or something. And, it was like kind of a work exchange thing. Everyone gets their first hand and blah. And, very much on the amateur level. But as that program grew, I kind of grew alongside that program and learned alongside, so I ended up doing like a music video that had a full CG environment. And was able to kind of take that knowledge into advantageous as well. And then, one of my partners, one of my life partner, Sean, he also is really well versed in like 2D VFX and now 3D VFX. And so there's a lot of background interchange and kind of spent a lot of time in that world. So I'm able to kind of speak the kind of basic language of visual effects with a lot of VFX supervisor and I kind of know like, oh, this might be something more doable than we realize, or maybe that's a little hard. If we compromise our shot a little, maybe we can pull this off in a really decent way for this budget. So I kind of can speak in that language and the VFX production level. And on Flight Attendant, we really had a great relationship. Me and Stephanie Johnson, who was our producer in the post department, we just were able to kind of immediately talk about, okay, how can we pull this off with this schedule? What do you need? What do I need? Can you do this for me? Can you go shoot a bunch of roses for me, please? So that we can comp those together, and it was just really, so it was a really good use of our time. And we were it helped to have the facility to kind of talk about post while you're in production.
Yeah. I know, we're kind of coming up on time here, but so I'll kind of skip to the end. But first of all, this has been a great conversation. I hope I can have you back. But yeah. But so the way that we kind of end it all is usually I'll ask if you were to. This doesn't quite work with television, so I got to reformulate this question, but I haven't done it yet. So, but usually it's if you were to put your film, or in this case, I guess The Flight Attendant, in a double feature, what would the other film be?
Oh no. Okay. Okay. Pardon me as I nerd out again. So The Flight Attendant was really wonderful as far as its like aesthetic goes, especially. I mean, not especially. I mean, honestly, the reason I even joined The Flight Attendant was because Kaylee and Sasha, Rosie, they're all just such extraordinary actors. And I knew that the casting was going to be stellar, or was already stellar. And so I could come in and just kind of work and, try to help create a really fun episode. But on top of that, their post-production was amazing. They were fearless in terms of the way they used split screens and motion graphics. And so as I, inserted myself into the show, or was invited to insert myself into the show, I had conversations with our DPs, Anthony Hardwick and Cord Fay, and our producing director, Silver Tree, who is this extraordinary director. And their references included Hitchcock. But there also another reference that came up was Brian De Palma's work, Dressed to Kill, I believe he directed that film. And Dressed to Kill has this blonde that's, running around town killing people and spying on people. And the use of the split diopter is prevalent, not in a lot of De Palma's work, and also Blow Out. Blow Out. Wait, Blow Up or Blow Out? Yeah, Blow Out. The one with
I can look it up.
I watched those films back to back, so that's why it's super easy for me to kind of conflate the two. But I think it's Blow Out because a tire blows out with John Travolta, and John Travolta plays this sound recordist. And
Blowout's Brian De Palma, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Blow Out, Dressed to Kill, split diopters, blondes. And if you watch that back to back with my episodes 3 and 4 of The Flight Attendant, season 2, you'll see that I kind of tried as much as possible to kind of bring the split diopter idea into Cassie's struggle with sobriety. So oftentimes Cassie will be, really wanting to drink. And so I would put in the foreground or in the background a bottle of alcohol or a bunch of bottles. We had a mini bar scene, and there was a shot in another, like a little shot of Icelandic gin, maybe. And we put that in the foreground and Kaylee in the background. And, as you know, with the split diopter, both planes are in focus, so you're playing with a deep focus shot. And so that, deep focus shots are interesting because they have a psychological effect. And De Palma was really known for his work in that zone.
Do you know a guy named Todd Vaziri?
Todd Vaziri, no.
He's I think he worked at ILM, but he's a VFX guy. I don't want to say very popular on Twitter because Twitter's like any film Twitter is very niche, but he has like a running tally of split diopter shots in films. I think it's it's got to be like at least 100 tweets long, and he just keeps adding to it every time. So I'll try to find a way to screenshot it. Although anytime you get on any streamer, you can't screenshot anything, but I'll try to, because of the DRM, you can't if you try to screenshot something, it goes black.
Yeah, I know about that. Wait, but he says on his Twitter feed, right?
Yeah. So he finds them. I don't know. I mean, he's a VFX guy. He's a genius. But I'll try to add those clips to his timeline there.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that he's a VFX guy because obviously you can cheat a split diopter shot anytime with VFX. Yeah. That's pretty funny.
It is. Yeah. I mean, that could get into a longer conversation about when to do it in camera and when to push that off to post, because that's something that is a whole hour-long conversation, because the answer is not always do it in camera. Sometimes it is better to do it in post. Totally.
And we definitely considered doing that a couple of times, but I don't think we did. Yeah.
And then actually the final question before we let you go, do you, off the top of your head, have a resource or even a piece of advice maybe that you received that you could suggest to people? So like a book, movie, documentary, whatever, or maybe something that was said to you or you read somewhere.
Yeah, I really should. I think one of my mentors would always say, he said two things always resonate in my head. One was, always make it about what you like. And that's for directors. It's I think an interesting way to think. Do I like this? Do I like this? Another thought is that you have to kind of fall in love with your story. You have to fall in love with your episode if you're making an episode, and really kind of live and breathe it. So that, because you're kind of its parent, as you're kind of making this thing. So let that happen. Let the love happen.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. It was a lot of fun. And like I said, anytime you want to come back, more than happy to have you.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thanks for geeking out with me on this.
Yeah, of course.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mapbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.